On August 15, 1812, in the vicinity of Fort Dearborn, in what is now Chicago, Illinois, then a part of the Illinois Territory, United States forces and Potawatomi Native Americans engaged in combat in what is commonly referred to as the Fort Dearborn Massacre. Following the fort's withdrawal on William Hull's orders as commander of the U.S. Army of the Northwest, the combat took place during the War of 1812. The Native Americans were declared the winners of the combat, which lasted around 15 minutes. Fort Dearborn was destroyed by fire following the fight. Later, a few of the captured troops and settlers were ransomed. As settlers continued to arrive into the region after the war, the federal authorities grew increasingly certain that all Indians needed to be driven off the land and the area around any settlements. In 1816, the fort was reconstructed. Under the leadership of Captain John Whistler, American forces built Fort Dearborn in 1803. It was situated in what is now the Loop neighborhood area of downtown Chicago, on the south side of the Chicago River's main stem. The region was considered wilderness at the time. Later Commander Heald said it was so remote from the civilized part of the world. Henry Dearborn, the U.S. Secretary of War at the time, was honored with the fort's name. Following the 1785 and 1795 Northwest Indian War, and the Treaty of Greenville, which was signed on August 3, 1795, at Fort Greenville, now Greenville, Ohio, it was put into service. Large portions of present-day Ohio and other land parcels, including 6 square miles, 16 square kilometers, centered around the mouth of the Chicago River, were given to the United States by the Western Confederacy, a coalition of Native Americans and frontiersmen as part of the stipulations of the treaty. At the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the British Empire gave the United States the Northwest Territory, which included sections of Minnesota, as well as what is today Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But since the Northwest Ordinance was signed in 1787, the region has been a point of contention between the U.S. and the Native American tribes. Tecumseh's brother and Shawnee prophet Tenskwatawa was followed by the Indian nations. Tenskwatawa envisioned eliminating the American immigrants, the children of the evil spirit, from his culture in order to purify it. To stop American encroachment, Tenskwatawa and Tecumseh organized a coalition of several tribes. The British gave the Native American countries weapons because they viewed them as important allies and a protective barrier for their Canadian territories. Tensions between the U.S. and Britain grew worse as a result of attacks on American settlers in the Northwest. American access to potentially important farmlands, mineral reserves, and fur trading areas was impeded by the Confederacy's incursions. A long-running rivalry led to the removal of Captain Whistler and other senior commanders from Fort Dearborn in 1810. Captain Nathan Heald, who had been sent to Fort Wayne, Indiana, took Whistler's position. Heald requested for and was granted a leave of absence to spend the winter in Massachusetts since he was unhappy with his new station. He married Rebecca Wells, the daughter of Samuel Wells, in Kentucky, while returning to Fort Dearborn, and the two of them went to the fort together in June 1811. In the Fort Dearborn region, hostility between the settlers and Native Americans grew as the United States and Britain approached war. British representatives attempted to win over the local Native Americans in the summer of 1811 by promising them assistance in fending against the American settlers' advances. Liberty White, an American, and John B. Carden, a French-Canadian, were killed by a group of Winnebago Indians on April 6, 1812, at a property named Hardscrabble, which was situated on the south branch of the Chicago River in the present-day Bridgeport neighborhood. A little boy who had escaped from the farm and a garrison soldier named John Kelso brought the news of the murder to Fort Dearborn. Some local residents took up residence in the fort after the murder, while the others sheltered in a home that had once belonged to Native American agent Charles Jouett. Captain Heald formed 15 men from the civilian population into a militia and provided them with ammunition and firearms from the fort. After the United States declared war on the British Empire on June 18, 1812, British soldiers took Fort Mackinac, which is located close to Lake Michigan's North Shore, on July 17th. Fearing that it could no longer be sufficiently stocked with food, General William Hull ordered Heald to leave Fort Dearborn, which is located close to the south shore of Lake Michigan, as soon as he learned of the loss of Fort Mackinac on July 29th. Hull instructed Heald to burn all the weapons and ammunition and deliver the remaining supplies to sympathetic Indians in the hopes of obtaining an escort to Fort Wayne in his letter to Heald, which reached Fort Dearborn on August 9th. Together with further directives to provide Heald all the information, counsel, and support they could, Hull also forwarded a copy of these orders to Fort Wayne, which is located southeast of Lake Michigan. During the next several days, a group of around 30 Miami Native Americans were brought together by Captain William Wells, the sub-Native American agent at Fort Wayne, and the uncle of Heald's bride, Rebecca. To provide an escort for the refugees, Wells, Corporal Walter K. Jordan, and the Miamis went to Fort Dearborn. On August 12th or 13, sources vary, Wells arrived at Fort Dearborn, and on August 14th, Heald convened a meeting with the Potawatomi elders to discuss his plan to leave the fort. The Native Americans thought that Heald had promised them a sizable payment if they sent a group of Potawatomis to securely accompany them to Fort Wayne, and that he would divide the guns, ammo, supplies, and whiskey among them. Heald, however, issued an order to burn all of the extra weapons, ammo, and alcohol because he was fearing that the Native Americans would make bad use of it if put in their possession. On August 14th, Heald received a warning from Black Partridge, a Potawatomi chief, that the tribe's young men planned to strike and that he was no longer able to control them. According to Heald's account, the garrison, which included 54 U.S. regulars, 12 militia, 9 women, and 18 children, departed Fort Dearborn at 9 a.m. on August 15th in preparation for their march to Fort Wayne. Several of the Miami escorts were in the back, and Wells led the group with several of them. The garrison was ambushed by a group of Potawatomi warriors around 1.5 miles, 2.4 kilometers, south of Fort Dearborn. According to Heald, the company marched to the top of a dune, shot a cartridge, then charged at the Native Americans after learning that they were getting ready to ambush from behind a dune. Because the cavalry and wagons were separated by the move, the larger Native American force was able to charge into the breach, split them apart, and encircle both parties. Some of the Native Americans attacked the wagon train, carrying the women, children, and supplies during the subsequent conflict. The militia, together with Ensign Ronan and the fort physician Van Voorhis, protected the carts. 2 of the ladies and the majority of the children were slaughtered, as were the officers and militia. Wells tried to ride to the rescue of those at the carts after withdrawing from the main combat. He was taken down while doing so. A group of Indians quickly ripped out his heart and ate it to absorb his courage after he fought off several Native Americans before being slain, according to eyewitness stories. After around 15 minutes of fighting, Heald and the remaining men pulled back to a raised spot on the grassland. After they turned themselves in, the Native Americans captured them and brought them to their camp close to Fort Dearborn. According to Heald's report, the Americans lost 26 regulars, 12 militia members, 2 women, and 12 children. The remaining 28 regulars, 7 women, and 6 children were captured. Accounts of the Miami warriors were submitted by survivors of the slaughter. While some claimed to have fought for the Americans, others denied any involvement in the conflict. Several of the battle's survivors have had their memories published. Charles Askin documented Heald's narrative in his diary on September 22, 1812. Heald also included succinct descriptions of the events in both his notebook and an official combat report. On October 12, 1812, Walter Jordan sent a letter to his wife detailing his version of events. Helm prepared a thorough account of what happened, but he put it off until 1814 because he was afraid of being court-martialed for criticizing Heald. Henry Schoolcraft documented John Kinsey's memories of the conflict in August 1820. Accounts of the conflict's specifics vary, especially when it comes to assigning blame for the combat. The conventional narrative of the fight is found in Waubun, The Early Day in the Northwest by Juliet Augusta McGill Kinsey, originally published in 1856. It is considered historically wrong, though, and is based on family legends. However, the level of public approval was shockingly high. The defending Americans have sometimes called the Battle of Fort Dearborn the Fort Dearborn Massacre, because so many Americans, including women and children, were murdered in the conflict. Compared to the comparatively lesser number of Potawatomi, it has been called a massacre. It has also been suggested that the Potawatomi fought the war as a kind of self-defense. The Native Americans destroyed the fort to the ground after the fight and moved their prisoners to their camp next to Fort Dearborn. Until the conclusion of the war, there were no American citizens in the area. Some of the inmates were eventually ransomed, while others perished while in captivity. But in 1816, the fort was reconstructed. Using the conflict of Fort Dearborn as an excuse to assault Miami towns, General William Henry Harrison, who was not present at the conflict, subsequently claimed that the Miami had fought against the Americans. As a result, Miami Chief Pecan and his nephew Jean-Baptiste Richardville joined up with the British and broke their neutrality in the War of 1812. When seen in the context of the War of 1812 and the wider struggle between Britain and France that led to it, this was a very minor and short fight. But it had far-reaching effects on the region, since the United States later pursued a policy of removing the tribes from the area, leading to the 1833 Treaty of Chicago, which culminated in 1835 with the final great Native American war dance in the fledgling city. It was arguably an example of winning the battle but losing the war for the Native Americans. The Potawatomi and other tribes were then relocated to the west. According to eyewitnesses, the combat took place on the lakeshore between 1.6 and 3.2 kilometers, 1 to 2 miles, south of Fort Dearborn. According to Heald's official account, the combat took place near the present crossroads of Roosevelt Road, 12th Street, and Michigan Avenue, 1 to 1/2 miles, 2.4 kilometers, south of the fort. Just before she passed away in 1870, Juliet Kinsey said that a big cottonwood tree that was still standing on 18th Street between Prairie Avenue and the lake had sparked the conflict. At the time of the fight, the tree was said to have been the last of a grove of trees that had been seedlings.